free.
Zion, get on board, get on. 'Tis the old ship of Zion, 'tis the old ship of Zion, 'tis the old ship of Zion. Get on board, get on board. I was lost in sin and sorrow on an island life's dark sea. When I saw far in the distance there a ship it seemed to be, then I saw the captain beckon as he called out loud and clear, I have come, my child, to save you. Step on board and follow me. There's no danger in the water. There's no danger in the water. There's no danger in the water. Get on board. Get on board.
We're on there. Hello, Facebook and YouTube. Jeff Arrington coming to you again live from Scott County, Virginia, in the community of Hilton's, Virginia. Have another good show for you today. We have, for the first time, an in-studio interview. It's exciting to have Senator Bill Carrico with us in studio today. Like you all saw yesterday, as we're trying some new things out with some video, Please bear with us if we have any technical issues. You notice as we started there, we had a few audio things we had to get straightened out, but you guys know how we roll here. We're pretty low tech. We just try to do what we can to do to bring you guys the best information that we possibly can. So again, we have in-house today Senator Bill Carrico. Bill was born in Marion, Virginia, grew up attending Chilhowie High School, right? Correct. Chilhowie, I love that area. It's a friend of mine that's out at work. He actually is from Chilhowie. We talk about him a lot. Virginia Highlands Community College graduate, and then on to the Virginia State Police Academy. Distinguished career in law enforcement as a state police officer, followed by the long career as a delegate of the 5th District from 2002 to 2011, and then a senator for the 40th District from 2012 to 2020. And, you know, one of the things we are going to talk about tonight that I do want to highlight right off from the bat, in your long service in the Senate and the delegate in the House of Delegates, you've battled for a lot of our rights, including legislation around the Second Amendment as well. So with that being said, it's an honor to have Senator Carrico in studio with us. Is there anything you'd like to add to that, Senator?
Well, I think it covers most of my career, and I've been blessed to be able to represent people and protect them. And from my career as a state trooper, even in the legislature, I focused around protecting people and their rights. And I was one of the go-to individuals in the General Assembly for First Amendment and Second Amendment rights, because I truly believed and was passionate about them. And so, you know, when I got there, I started bringing up the right to pray freely, according to the dictates of your conscience, because Christians were being attacked and are still being attacked. And, you know, the ACLU, everybody lines up against them, but that's not what the Constitution protects. It protects you and your ability to pray within the context of your conscience and not be structured or made to say a certain prayer or anything. And from that led to Second Amendment rights that, you know, as a former state trooper and as police officers, we're the strongest protectors of the Second Amendment right, because we feel that that individual has more of a chance to protect themselves before we can get to them. And we know that the seconds counts when we're minutes away. So police officers are your biggest Second Amendment supporters that you'll find, because we understand the elements of the crime.
Well, and you made a comment there. It's a common saying we hear whenever, you know, what does it say? When an emergency is only seconds away or you need protection. How's that saying go? I can't remember how it is.
When police are seconds or minutes away, the seconds between those minutes is what counts.
That's what counts. And that's not to say anything bad about our police force or any of our officers, because it's just a fact. You guys can't be anywhere, everywhere, which, I mean, I'm not trying to jump. I don't even know if it's one of our questions to talk about the supporting the police, but if you think about that, that's why, you know, people are talking about defunding. I mean, it's already difficult enough to have our officers be able to sufficiently cover large areas. If anything, we should be having a conversation around increasing their funding.
Absolutely.
So
that's how you know, the government's job, number one job, is to protect the people. Mm-hmm. And so law enforcement, this attack to defund police is just the government's way of walking away from what their number one job is. And having been a police officer out there on the street every day now, talk about being able to be everywhere all the time. In the state police, I was the only trooper in Grayson County when I was assigned there in 480 square miles. Now, how am I going to be in those places? And Scott County's much like that. You only have one, but you have deputies and you have town police officers. But those individuals get caught in situations that they have to have backup, and their backup are miles away.
Yes.
And so we really have got to focus on the damage that this General Assembly is doing to law enforcement and to protect people.
Yes.
And the whole essence of law enforcement, that badge that they wear, is the authority the people give them. So anytime you attack that individual, you're attacking the people.
That's exactly right.
Well, that's their authority.
And you know, there's so many things that we talk about here on the show consistently for some of our viewers to understand. So, for instance, one of the points I consistently try to make to people understand, what you said is the government's role is to protect the people's rights. In fact, the Constitution is in place to only describe to the degree of any infringements that can be done. We don't get our rights from the Constitution. They're God-given rights. A lot of people don't like it when I say that, and I understand why people have perhaps religious beliefs where they don't like that comment. But when it says we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, I believe that says exactly what it says. And the Constitution outlines those rights, but those are God-given rights. You could, at the end of the day, as much as I love our Constitution and I love our process, and we can always improve, but you can take the Constitution, rip it up, and throw it away. We still have our rights.
Absolutely.
And so again, just to clarify for our reviewers, we do have folks that sometimes watch that are liberals and Democrats, and that's perfectly fine. It's just a common point that I usually try to make up, that I make sure that people understand that. So
well, Jefferson wasn't your typical religious individual, and he was the one that crafted the language,
mm-hmm.
and he even understood that you are endowed by your Creator.
That's right.
With these certain unalienable rights. That among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
That's exactly right.
And liberty, and without liberty, you can't pursue that happiness.
That's right.
And life doesn't go on because you're dictated. Your life is dictated by the government, not by your choice, by your choosing. In America, with our Constitution and with our freedoms, we can be as wealthy as we want. We can be as poor as we want. We can be as middle class as we want. It's up to you how hard you want to work to get there.
That's right.
And, entitlements are not a part of freedom. It's a part of socialism.
That's right. Well, and I believe it was Jefferson also said, a government big enough to give you what you want is big enough to take away everything you need.
Absolutely.
And so, I think in essence, I think our founders didn't intend for things to be perfect. Again, it says pursuit of happiness. It doesn't say you're guaranteed happiness. You have to work for that, right? And those three fundamental things, to me, when you read the Bill of Rights and any of the amendments since then, they all tie back to one of those three. And that's the thing that's sadly, and again, we're maybe getting a little off topic. This is a great conversation. We're sadly seeing people that, one, they think the government's what gives you your rights. If that's true, then they can take them away. And there's really nothing you can do about it, because if that's where they came from, then who are you to argue with the government if they give them to you, right? You think about those three fundamental things, and that's just so fundamental to what America is. Well,
that's why, going back to the biblical reference,
mm-hmm.
pursuit of happiness. That's why God said, think on these things that are pure, things that are holy, because you start thinking about the bad things, you're not going to pursue happiness. You're going to be downtrodden.
That's right.
And our founders, there's no way you can ever say anything that they wrote or put down, was written down, didn't come from a biblical standing. Exactly because right. You can relate it all to scriptural verses, scriptural language. And I think that was how they were educated. So that was how it was written.
Well, and more, a big part of our channel is trying to make sure people understand the misinformation that's out there. And again, this is good points. So we're going to get to the questions, folks. I promise you in a second. But it's important to understand the misinformation that society is trying to paint, that America is not a Christian nation, that our founding fathers were not Christians. And now there were certainly some that had some different views, but fundamentally, you're exactly correct. And it's not that they were brainwashed. They were very cognizant of what they were doing. Very aware of what they were doing, and it absolutely has its foundation in Christianity, religious freedom. People completely misunderstand, I think, the concept of separation of church and state. Essentially, you can't have a church like if we think about the Rome days and the British Empire, you had a pope that might give a dictate and just say it, and that was all of a sudden legislation. You can't have a religious leader just say what the laws are. It doesn't work. That's the separation of church and state. So to say a prayer has nothing to do with separation of church and state. That's free speech. Well,
if you read the letter that the courts ruled that on, from Jefferson to the Danbury Baptist, Jefferson was clear that the state would not run the church, but they have reversed it.
Yes.
They have skewed the language, and it's not. Look, Jefferson was not the most whole individual that led, nor was Franklin, nor was Samuel Adams.
Mm-hmm.
You start talking about these founders that founded this nation, they weren't, your front row Christian individuals that sat on the front row of church every night. They were actual men who were taught through biblical principles, but they had a moral compass.
That's right.
And that moral compass is what we've lost. And we've got to have that moral compass to be able to instill those freedoms. We just can't. Folks, can't go the other way.
Our viewers know that Wilson, we refer to Jason as Wilson from the Home Improvement Show. But I was just having this conversation with Jason yesterday around, there's just one more thing here about speaking of Jefferson. There's a modernist thing called the Jefferson Bible. I don't know if you've heard about it.
Oh yes, I've heard.
And there's a lot of people that say, well, see, Jefferson made his own Bible. They don't realize that it was originally called The Life and Morals of Jesus of Nazareth. And there's a whole list, and I'm not going to go into the history of why it is, but that's the reason that was the original title. Jefferson did not make it and say this is the Jefferson Bible. So again, and again, I'll throw out there too, when you look at our founding fathers, and I cannot remember the gentleman's name, it was John something. He wasn't a founder, it was before our founders, but it was where they got a lot of their religious understandings. When it comes to being a tyrant, part of tyranny is essentially, if you read it as far as what the founders would structure what tyranny is, it's essentially whenever you violate God's wills in one way or another, right? Which is sadly what we're seeing today in a lot of places across the U.S. And by the way, we do have viewers that are all across the U.S. So to any folks that are watching this, although we're sitting here certainly talking about the state of Virginia, understand that these things are going to be coming at your door as well. I was talking with the senator here just before we went live, and I was saying, as you guys know, I never thought I'd be doing this. I was the one that was complacent and thought it's California, it's New York, it's not here. It may not be in your state right now, and if quite frankly, if we have anything to say about it, we'll stop it in Virginia. I guess that's just saying plainly what I would say.
But why is Virginia so important? And I'll tell you why. Because as Virginia goes, so does the nation. It's been through all history. So Virginia is a battleground. So you have to fight to protect Virginia from going in that direction, because the rest of the nation will follow.
Yes.
And so we've got to fight. That's why, going back to founders, when Patrick Henry stood in St. Paul's, St. John's Church, whichever, I can't remember now. It was in Richmond in 1755, and he said, his famous speech there, "Give me liberty or give me death." He was expressing to the people that, without liberty,
mm-hmm.
all there is death.
Mm-hmm.
And, in Deuteronomy, it talks about choose you this day between life and death, a blessing and curse. He understood that they had choices to make. And if they didn't make them, that their liberties were gone and death would follow.
Yes. And
death would have followed these men if they had not took the stand that they took.
Well, and to think about how far circle we've came, I don't know who said this recently. It was someone, I know I was reading an article about it, that someone that made the comment that they said they would rather live on their knees than die on their feet. And such an opposite comment from a fundamental American mindset of liberty and freedom, and that it's worth fighting for. Because to me, if you say you're going to live on your knees, if you're on your knees, you're probably not going to live much longer. Right. And furthermore, you're not living. That's not a life.
No.
There's public service. There's certainly Christian leadership and Christian servitude, but slavery, which is essentially if we enslaved to a government and to tyrants, that's no life.
Yeah, slavery was wrong
mm-hmm.
on our behalf.
Absolutely.
Of enslaving anyone, and we paid for those sins.
Mm-hmm.
We paid during the Civil War for those sins.
That's right.
For that blood and for that slavery, we paid for it, and we'll pay for the sins of our forefathers in the abortion part of it also.
That's exactly correct.
Because the shedding of innocent blood, I think we're paying for it already. Who knows? We could have had a cure for cancer. One of those aborted children could have been a doctor that found the cure. Who knows? We don't know. We don't know that potential of that individual because they were aborted.
Absolutely.
And
well,
millions.
It wasn't a question on here, but pro-life, pro-choice?
Pro-life.
Pro-life. Okay, so we'll use that as a transition into some questions here, so if that's all right. So great conversation, guys. You all know how we roll here. We're just, I sometimes say fireside chats. We don't have the fire on. Is it comfortable where you come from?
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Again, just you know how we roll. We just kind of go with it. It's just a conversation, and glad you all are here to join along. So, okay, so right off the bat, we know you're considering and praying and thinking about your decision for the governor's race in 2021. Now, I want to first off say, of course, we've got a big challenge in front of us with November coming up, right? Both in the Commonwealth of Virginia as well as nationally. So I don't want to just distract and detract from November, but where's your stance on the governor's race in 2021?
Well, I've been working with a lot of the congressional and U.S. Senate campaigns that are going on in Virginia. I've been considering this since March. I started my own PAC called SecureVAPAC.com that kind of lays out all my initiatives. I believed years ago, I watched election process take place when we started moving towards a blue state, and watching the individuals in rural districts that just get discouraged and won't go out and vote. Predominantly Republican, which is about 70%. And we only turn out 32% of our voters.
Yes.
So it's a question of turnout. Now, if you look back through history, you see the candidates have all been from Richmond, from Northern Virginia. A lot of the Democratic candidates are not even from Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
My family's been here since the 1700s. And so what I started looking at is what could provoke the voters in these rural areas to come out. And I believe it's to give them someone who knows their plights, the things that they deal with each and every day. A rural legislator like myself that served 18 years in the General Assembly and who's lived all over the Commonwealth. With the state police, I've lived in Southside Virginia. I've lived in Richmond, Virginia. I've lived in the Northern Neck. So the state police has give me an opportunity to live everywhere in Virginia and to understand what the dynamics of the state is. And you know, you always hear, well, there's no chance for a Southwest Virginia candidate to win because he's not from the suburbs. I would argue that I've lived in the suburbs. I understand what the suburbs are like. I lived in the city. I lived in Richmond. I worked undercover in Richmond. And so I understand the state. So that's why I've looked at this really hard in considering it. And there's going to be candidates more that get in this by the time this election's over. But I've tried to stress through this whole process, the most important election we have got to face right now is 2020. Let's don't talk about 2021 as much as 2020. And then once 2020 is over with, let's focus on 2021 and move ahead.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And folks, just for our viewers again online. So Jason, we're still good on technology. Everything good?
Everything good.
Guys, if it does drop out again, just stay with us. We'll get back on whatever it takes to make sure we keep this going. But, you know, you touched on some very important points, because I know folks that I talk to a lot of times, but as you were saying, the focus is on Northern Virginia. They think Northern Virginia is what always carries the state. And I would argue that maybe even historically they have somewhat of an argument, but it's based upon that turnout, right?
Well,
so
yeah, I mean, the turnout is the key.
The turnout's the key. Well, and so another one of the big things, and I know you may not know much about our group, but one of the big things that we do with DeLynn and others in our group, and I'll say this now for any folks in Scott County, you know, we can help you get registered to vote. If you're not registered to vote, we encourage you to tell your neighbors, your friends, your family, get out and vote. We hear people all the time that they think their vote don't matter. And we say, well, if you don't vote, it certainly doesn't matter. That's correct. So it's very important. So if you're in rural Virginia or rural anywhere, guys, for that matter, but particular Virginia, you know, be mindful of the fact that your vote very much so matters. You've got to get out and vote to make it count, okay? I'd love to see rural Virginia get up to have a 70, 80, 90% turnout. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah, we're going to clean the clock if we do that.
It would be a landslide, would it not?
It would be a landslide.
I mean, think about that, guys. It would be a landslide. It really would. Go look at the numbers. I also tell my viewers, I say, trust but verify. Always go, you know, don't just take my word on it. It's the same thing whenever I say you're listening to someone talking from the Bible. They can be holding the Bible and they can be sitting there saying, it's okay to have abortions. Are you going to take the word on it? No, you need to go look and see what's there. So don't take our word on it. I always encourage our folks to be free thinkers. Absolutely. I think that's fundamentally something we should all do. We should hold our representatives accountable.
Sure.
So I would say the same thing to you, Bill, that I would say to anybody. And if you don't, I've said this before to others, I say, you know, with what we're going to be talking about tonight, now we know circumstances can sometimes change, but there's going to be fundamental morals and principles that you run on. Mm-hmm. And I would be the first to tell you right now, if you got in there and flip-flopped on me, I would be against you as much as I would be anybody else.
I expect you to call me on it.
That's excellent. That's excellent. So, and I mean, I think that's when you go into public service, to me, you should not only understand that, but promote that concept.
Right.
We almost see some political, I hesitate to call them leaders, but political representatives that seem to think that once I'm in political position, don't question me. Right.
And it's really, you know, legislating is a process. And there's amendments and there's things that happen at the last minute that changes the votes. But through the whole process, there's an opportunity now with internet that you can watch this whole thing. Now, if it happens on the floor, then there's last minute decisions that have to be made. And, you know, what's the difference in someone who says who campaigns on, I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that, and then he goes and does that same thing. There's a huge difference in that. But there are times in which bills come up that you may be supporting that an amendment gets stuck to it that you just feel there's no way that it's going to help your people.
And that's very difficult for folks to sometimes understand.
It is very difficult.
I mean, that's one. I mean, I'm not great in understanding how all this place works, how all the legislation works, but I know enough to know the little bit that I've learned. So I just want to reiterate this for our viewers: is reiterate what you just said. Sometimes you will hear someone campaigning for a bill, an amendment gets added, and that can completely change the outcome of that, what was intended with the bill, right?
Yeah. And look, I'll give you an example. And like I've told you before, I'm an open book. I'll whether you like my answer or not, I'll give it to you. You know, I campaign on low taxes. I didn't campaign on no taxes, low taxes. And I got challenged on the fact that I supported a gas tax on I-81. Well, we were having 11 million vehicles travel up and down I-81. We were having a problem. And so I supported a gas increase on I-81 to try to improve that, because 44% of our state's economy is on I-81. So therefore I supported that. And then there were some people that said, well, you're against taxes. You said you wouldn't support taxes. I said, I'm for low taxes, not no taxes. Mm-hmm. I don't think you should use it all the time. Mm-hmm. But government, if it functions right and it grows, I mean, your economy grows and your population grows, then there's got to be a way to pay for that. The same people who say don't support taxes call screaming about fixing the road.
Right, right.
So you can't have both.
Right.
I mean,
well, if you do, you're in a socialist country if you have both. Of course, in a socialist country, they're going to tax you at 90%.
It is. And so I believe in low taxes, mm-hmm. but I believe there's circumstances where you have got to address a need. Mm-hmm. And that need has to be shared by everyone, including people out of state that are utilizing it. And I don't think people on this call understands that Virginia has the third largest transportation system in the nation.
I didn't realize that.
We're the third largest. Number two is North Carolina. So we're adjoining two states. And I mean, our two states have the largest transportation system. And the largest transportation system because of our ports, our rail, our airports, the Northern Virginia mixing bowl. So it costs a lot of money to fix roads, to do the things to keep you moving, mm-hmm. and to keep you moving safe. And I think people have got to understand the underlying issues whenever they've got to face some ways to try to fix those.
Well, if you don't mind, maybe with what you're talking about, it makes me think of some quotes we were talking about our founding fathers earlier. And maybe it's a bit extreme in today's term, but government's a necessary evil.
It is.
I would say taxes are also a necessary evil. You can't have no taxes, okay? If you don't mind now, transparency with taxes. Mm-hmm. I think there should be full transparency.
Absolutely.
Because to me, otherwise, if you don't have that transparency, then I would say that's where I might start going along with that quote of taxation theft, right? Because if I take advantage of it, that's bad. You've got to have transparency to understand where those taxes are going, right?
So you're going to have to prove why.
That's right.
There's no reason why you shouldn't, as a legislator, have to prove why you increase that. Mm-hmm. And it's like I was saying, 11 million vehicles on I-81. I-81 was designed at the interchange of I-77 and I-81 to handle 47,000 trucks in a week's time. It's 47,000 a day now, 11 million a year, and 44% of your goods. So let's say don't fix I-81. Mm-hmm. So what does that mean? That means everything that you produce in Southwest Virginia that goes to the port in Newport News don't get there anymore.
That's right.
Everything that you buy at Walmart don't get here anymore.
That's right.
So
there's got to be infrastructure.
You've got to have infrastructure. You got to do it. I think that we have educational opportunities. We have transportation issues. We have core services that we need to focus on. Is there wasteful spending? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. But that's the governor's job to prioritize it. The General Assembly only affects probably 3 to 4% of that budget. The rest of it is the governor's initiatives.
Well, that's why they're the leader of the state, right?
That's why they lead the state.
They're accountable for that. Okay, so just moving on to some other questions. So what do you, we know you've not made an official decision yet. You're still praying about that. But, we know we've had you were at the parade. By the way, if you guys go back and watch one of our older episodes, it was a little crazy with the camera. But we did had the parade in Gage City to back our brothers and sisters in blue. Bill actually carried our flag in the very front of that. So, we know you're attending some events and talking to some folks. What are you hearing are some of the headline issues across the Commonwealth?
Well, I think the law and order issue is the biggest issue that you hear today. And that's what kind of resonates with people when I speak is they know my background.
You've lived that life.
I've lived that life. I've walked a mile in those shoes. I always quote the scripture from Proverbs that says that those who call just evil and evil just are an abomination to God. And if that doesn't fit today's society, there's so much of leadership calling what's happening through rioting and burning of businesses, peaceful protest. So they're calling unjust things good.
That's right.
And then they're, on the other hand, trying to take all the arrest powers and all the authority away from police, and they're trying to take what is good and make it look evil. Now, is there bad policemen? There is. Is there bad teachers? There is. Is there bad preachers? There is.
There is.
We live in a world where evil exists, and so it's going to feed its way into other things. But we have an opportunity to weed that out.
Yes.
But we're never going to stop it completely. But to punish all the good doers for a bad deed is not the way it works.
Or, it's interesting because I've had this conversation with some folks online here lately talking about exactly what you're talking about. And I used the example of medical malpractice. I said, there are doctors that are just bad doctors. Does that mean we should hate all doctors? No. Another thing that's sadly being lost, I think, in our society these days is accountability. To me, you're accountable for your actions. And if you have a bad officer, a bad fireman, a bad lawyer, a bad judge, whatever it is, that should not take down the entire profession. The individual should be accountable for that. And so if you do have, and I apologize, kind of going off script here, but with your background, it's interesting to have a police officer, former police officer in here with us. If just for our viewers, if they understand, because I've heard some people say that, well, officers don't go after bad officers. They don't do that. Can speak about that in turn, just real quickly, if you could just let them know.
So let me do that in depth, because I'll tell you where we're headed. In this past session, there was a bill that was passed for collective bargaining. So what that means is counties and cities can now form unions within the law enforcement, and that they can now collectively bargain for an individual if they do something bad. Example, Minneapolis, Minnesota. They're a union. Their union leader bargains with the leadership, and bad police officers are not fired. In Virginia, we didn't have collective bargaining until this General Assembly session. They passed it, and the governor signed it into law to take effect in May of 2021. Now, it doesn't affect the state because he understood, and they understood the cost of that. Now, in Virginia, the agency that I work for, the state police, they have a general order manual. They have strict guidelines that you operate by. You operate outside the boundaries of that, they fire you. There's no questions asked. You're fired. There's no union that's going to save you. They have an association that fights for better pay and stuff for law enforcement, but the leader of that agency has that authority. With a union, they have that authority is gone. So within the police agencies, they have what's called a internal affairs unit. The internal affairs unit are the police that are policing the police. And these are the guys that are hated by all police because they know if they show up, they screwed up. And so they're chosen by their ability to investigate, their ability to not be swayed. And so they're supervisors. And so when they come in and they basically investigate a police officer, they're going to come back with a true meaning of what happened there. And then that colonel is going to make that decision. Either you're staying or you're going. Mm-hmm. And if it wasn't so egregious that it can be dealt with leave without pay or whatever, then they will keep you, but they will, what they call is give you a group offense. and that stays on your record for a full year. So you're kind of on probation again for a full year, and then you're if something else happens, you're gone. So there is truly steps to keep bad police officers from staying within the agency. Now, they have done some things that I agree with, because even in 1985, we felt like there should have been a registry of bad police officers so that you couldn't hop from one state or one agency to another.
Hearing this from a police officer first, too.
Yeah, I'm all for it. Let's do it. And then in 2018, I believe it was, I introduced the bill to do psychiatric evaluations of every law enforcement officer prior to them being hired, because you can see a trend.
Mm-hmm.
If you do this evaluation first, that they could, either they're not going to be able to handle the job, or they weren't exactly what they were just doing it because they thought it was a cool job, or they couldn't find another job or whatever. And the highest suicide rates within law enforcement. And you did two things. You weeded out some of the bad, and you protected some of those that can't handle the stress of it. I mean, it is not easy whenever you go to the scene of an accident or a shooting, and the victim's laying there and they're dead, and you're closing out that last part of the history of their life.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go to that home and you break that news to the family, and that family just falls apart, and you sitting in the floor crying with them because you saw what happened.
Right.
And you're trying to avoid that hurt with that family, but they've just, when you work an accident, a car accident, and a man is killed, and you knock on the door and the 4-year-old runs the door, thinks his daddy's coming home.
Mm-hmm. And
you're there to tell him his daddy's never coming home.
Yeah.
That has an effect on your life.
I can only imagine.
And you never forget that. And some people just can't handle that for their whole life. And that's why the suicide rates are so high. So law enforcement is not an easy job. Anybody out there that's thinking about going into it, you better have a calling to do it, or you'll never survive it.
Well, and I think it's all too easy, as we say, in this digital world. You've got keyboard warriors that can sit back and
Criticize.
And I mean, sometimes it's maybe human nature to criticize when you're not there, but I think it's very important that when you think about all of our first responders,
right,
put yourself in their shoes. The story you just
rescue.
told. That's right. I mean, or I know there's been plenty of videos. There's a lot of criticism if we think again about police officers. Those literally second decisions. I can't imagine. I'm sure you probably had the training, but I've seen the videos where they've taken civilians in and said, "Hey, let's put you through this training." Of course, they have like a 95% failure rate, right? I mean, literally seconds, just split seconds, when a life and death decision has to be made. Let alone working accidents and the trauma and the psychology that comes along with that. But in those maybe domestic disputes or whatever else may be going on, where, like you said, I mean, you've got just seconds to make a very life critical decision.
So the FBI put together a shoot don't shoot scenario BATS machine, which is a machine that projects a situation, and you have a simulated gun and you shoot. So they did it for elected officials, media, and everyone else.
Audio's still good, right, Jay? Okay,
and I decided I was going to go.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't going to tell them who it was or what. I mean, they knew I was a senator, but they didn't know my background. So I go in and I go into the process of this. Well, I kill the assailant every time, and they're just kind of marveled. But then the media and the other people step up and they get killed, because the scenario changes all the time. And I did it for one reason. After it was over with, I told them what I had done for a living. And I did that for one reason: to prove to the people that were there how much training really goes into decision making on whether you shoot or you don't shoot. And I think that kind of helped them understand. I don't know how you watch all this at one time, you don't know how to do that, but your training teaches you how to do that. And so if an individual would go and do it, you're right. If you've never had no training, if you never knew how to pull a gun, how to focus on the sight, not the target, how to hit the individual in the kill zones, you're not going to be successful. And even if you're a gun owner and you shoot all the time, it's still different. It's still totally different.
I can imagine.
And so, I would encourage anybody, if they see those being offered, go and do it. Just see how successful you can be.
Absolutely.
And how nervous it makes you, because number one, for me, I'm looking for the gun. I'm not looking or paying attention to what's going on around me. I'm looking who's got the gun.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm looking for the threat. Once I see the gun, is it coming up? Is it a gun? Is it what is it? And the 21-foot rule with a knife is so important, because if you're 21 feet away from me, you're going to kill me before I can pull the gun.
That's something a lot of people don't understand that either. That's an important thing. People don't think about the fact that someone can cover 21 feet and stab you with a knife faster than you can pull and discharge your firearm.
Absolutely. And it's happened so many times with law enforcement that the 21-foot rule wasn't just made up.
Mm-hmm.
It was actually,
But again, people
how
that
long
never,
it takes you to draw. And
people that have never experienced that, they hear that and they think, well, it was someone with just a knife.
right.
And they don't understand. Again, you've got to try to put yourself in the shoes of a police officer that deals with that situation. Again, I can't imagine, I can't.
And someone that carries a knife like this, opposed to this, is different too. One that carries it like this is more dangerous than the person that carries the knife like this, because they know how to use it.
Yeah.
They had just got it as a threat.
Well, and if you don't mind, because you just said that made me think of something else too. We talk about it a lot here. First off, I hope it's in the camera view, but that's the original assault rifle. It's a weapon when someone uses it to attack somebody, but the biggest weapon is whether it's a pen or a knife or a firearm, the biggest threat is the person. You drop that knife down, you drop that firearm down, and it's just a tool. It's like a hammer. It's like a pen. It's the term assault. Assault is a verb. It's an action, right? And we can elaborate on that.
That was in my whole career. I was the guy in the 2012 session that reversed the law that said that you could only purchase one handgun a month.
This is big. Listen to this, guys. Repeat that one more time.
So in the 2012 session, the law had been in place that you could only purchase one handgun a month, and it was brought into law by Tim Kaine, the U.S. Senator. And so I brought the bill forward, and we reversed that law. It passed by 21 votes, 21-19.
Which allowed us to be able to buy more than
one handgun. And so the argument was, why does anyone need more than one handgun? Well, why does anyone need more than one car?
Absolutely.
Why does anyone need more than one pair of shoes? It's their right. It's their freedom. They can buy it. They've not committed a crime.
That's right.
And I told a story. Look, a gun sitting on a table has never killed a soul. Mm-hmm. It's never killed anyone. It's the guy that picks the gun up and shoots it. So why are we penalizing people who have never committed a crime from purchasing firearms? And to add insult to injury for them to reverse that bill that I got passed.
So just for the folks, just in case you're not following, this past session they reversed it. Now in Virginia,
you're only allowed one handgun.
So they reversed the bill that Bill had put in place.
And to do that is just absurd, because the federal government, under their restrictions, once you buy more than three, they start tracking. Mm-hmm. So there's already a limit. So the 3-gun issue had merit. People just let them go buy their guns. Let them buy 3 a month, because if they buy 4, they're going to get tracked by, which I don't agree with.
Also, we can argue that.
Yeah,
right.
I don't agree
that's a whole
with
other
that
issue,
either.
right?
Yeah, that's a whole nother issue, but I'm not on the federal level.
Yeah.
Because I think if you're not a criminal, who cares how many you buy?
I tell people all the time, I say, when people start saying, well, you don't need that. I said, do you have a car that registers more than, let's say, pick 80 miles per hour? Mm-hmm. I don't know how, but I would imagine there's probably maybe somewhere out west there might be one with 80 miles per hour, but I'm sure there's none that go over 85 or 90 in the U.S. So I would say to everybody, why do you have a car that can go faster than 85 or 90 miles an hour?
Absolutely.
Now, and I would argue there too is, if you have an emergency, you make a judgment call. You may risk and say, I'm going to violate the speed limit because the risk of me dying is greater than me getting to the hospital, because if I don't, I might die by not getting to the hospital. So, but again, that's part of your freedoms. You make a conscious decision. So, when people talk about capacity of a magazine, why do you need a high capacity? Well, what does it matter if I do nothing wrong with it? I mean,
If you're a sportsman shooter, why should I have to reload everything? If I want 30 rounds in my magazine, I shouldn't have to have 10.
Yep.
A 10-round magazine and have 3 of them.
Yep.
I should be able to put 30 in there. And I'll tell you this, I'm so strong pro gun that I could care less if you had 50 in your magazine. Absolutely. Because the criminals are never going to stop. I mean, they're going to get the 50-round mags. They're going to get the high-powered rifles. And you can ban the sale of weapons tomorrow. That doesn't stop the criminals from getting.
That's right. In fact, it increases the black market. Right?
It does. It increases the black market, and it also does underground building of weapons.
That's exactly right.
And so you're actually, by allowing people purchase it, you're allowing to have some idea of what's there. Mm-hmm. And you're able to protect yourself. Well,
and for some of our viewers, some of you guys may not be really familiar with firearms, but I'm not a gunsmith, but I mean, I've done enough things on my hands on the farm. I could probably figure out how to make a magazine bigger if I wanted to, right? I mean, and criminals they get creative. I'm
a former firearms instructor with the state police. I worked with armors. I can figure this out pretty easily. Yeah. And most, in the General Assembly, it was like when we argued about these gun bills. I said, do you realize I've been sitting among you with a gun the whole time? My whole career, I was carrying a firearm. And their response back to me was, well, we know you're trained, having been a former police officer. And I said, but do you know who trained me? It's my father, who was a sheetrock finisher. It wasn't the state police that trained me how to shoot that gun or how to be responsible. It was my father. So you're telling everybody now that they should go through training with my dad because you're trusting me.
Right.
And I carried a firearm the whole time I was there because I worked undercover in Richmond. And there's a lot of people who were out of jail who knew me thanks to the Richmond Times. So I carried it when I walked the streets. And everybody, the hypocritical part of this, everybody that opposes firearms followed me everywhere we went because they knew if something happened, I was armed.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, like you said, it shows the hypocritical nature, but it also shows that deep down inside, they know the truth. They just don't want to accept it.
And would I protect them? I sure would have.
Absolutely.
Whether I like you or not, I'm going to make sure that nobody hurts you.
Well, I tell a lot of people, it's about freedom and liberty. So when I tell folks that maybe don't like firearms, I say, listen, I understand that you don't understand firearms, and maybe you're scared of them because you've seen Hollywood or seen Rambo. But first off, that's not reality. Secondly, it should be my freedom. I'm not going to tell you that you have to own a firearm. That's the beautiful thing about our rights. It's our choice to choose if we exercise them or not. And the left that's making this argument about saying we want to restrict you, that would be no different. I mean, the reverse of that would be me turning around and saying every person has to own a firearm. I wouldn't support that legislation because I think that's a violation of your rights also. I mean, it's forcing you to exercise your rights. That's taking away part of your freedom of choice. Right. Or
you have Biden who says, just carry a shotgun.
Oh, yeah, and shoot through the door, right? Yeah, that's what he says.
Well, have you seen someone shot with a shotgun?
Oh, yeah. I've not seen someone. I can only imagine.
Let me tell you, go ahead and shoot me with a pistol or a rifle, because that really is a messy situation.
Yeah, and by the way, do not take your firearm safety comment from Biden because he said, fire 2 blasts in the air? I mean, how irresponsible.
Or shoot him in the leg.
Yeah. How?
You're going to die if you shoot them in the leg
Yes.
because they're still capable of shooting you.
That's right. Well, I tell people all the time when it comes, if you make the personal choice to carry a firearm, first off, you do not draw that firearm unless there is need to draw that firearm. You don't draw it just to make a threat. I personally don't believe in that.
So I teach for concealed weapon carries. And I show them how easy I can take the gun away from you. And I teach all the people I instruct, pull it, shoot it. Because if you don't, they're going to take it and kill you with it.
That's right. That's right. Well, and that's just it. You don't pull it until you're prepared to shoot. And you don't shoot until you're prepared to kill.
Because some people like me are not going to be intimidated by the gun coming out. I'm going to be looking at taking it away from them.
That's right. That's right. And I mean, I think the point there is, I mean, it's a responsibility that every gun owner, if you don't understand that responsibility, you need to really reflect, right? Because it is something that for your own personal safety, like you said, you carry a firearm. If you're not prepared to fully operate and use that, you could get killed with your own firearm. Right?
And more people get killed by their own. The study showed prior to the safety holsters and the improved training of law enforcement, the number of law enforcement officers killed by their own gun were so high that they had to do retraining and more of a protective holster. So imagine what a common citizen is going to face.
Absolutely.
You know, and I kind of, I try to tell my students that come through that I teach, and I don't do a lot. I do friends and family members that I know. I teach them, do not, when you're in the checkout line and you got your gun on, don't stick your hip out for someone to take the gun away from you. Mm-hmm. Always keep it covered. Always keep, if you can hide it, because you know it is so, when you expose it, it's when you're most vulnerable. And so I just feel like some people, they take a firearms class, and I always make them shoot. I want to see that they can use the weapon. And they take a firearms class and never hold the weapon, never shoot the weapon, they never pull the trigger, and they don't understand how easily those things go wrong. So I want to know that they're proficient with it when I teach them. And, you know, that's what my dad taught me.
Well, I probably go a little extreme. I tell people when I've talked to them before, I say, and this is extreme, but it makes the point about how much of an acceptance of responsibility you have. I say with a firearm, a pistol, you should be able to just about close your eyes and disassemble and reassemble that firearm. That's the level of familiarity you should have with your firearm. Yeah. Because if you do, and it's not that that's trying to be cool or rambo, it's just a matter of, it just shows that you know the firearm, right? And so, again, I'm not saying that necessarily that even I could necessarily truly do that, truly blindfolded, but it just urges the point of being familiar with your firearm.
Plus the fact you're keeping it clean if you know how to do it in the dark.
That's absolutely right. You've got to keep it clean. So, all right, we're going good, and this is just such an easy conversation. I appreciate the chat. Let's jump down to some of these more questions here. Let's see here. So,
I was going to say, getting registered, you only have, 10 more days?
Is it 10 more days?
Yeah. Go get registered.
Get registered. That's right. So don't forget that, guys. And again, reach out to us if you have some questions about getting registered. We can help you out. Okay, just a couple questions here, if you don't mind, Senator. Let's see here. Are there any other events coming up that are across? Oh, actually, I want to back up a second because it was right before the technology went out. You mentioned the PAC website. I wanted to get another pitch for that.
It is securevapac.com. securevapac.com.
Excellent. So if somebody's listening out there, if you guys can put that comment on there, we'd greatly appreciate that. Are there any other rallies coming up that you're going to be planning to attend, or some folks might be able to see you?
I'm actually, anytime that any of the candidates are down here to speak or whatever, I usually go with them and speak on their behalf. Like I said before, I'm focusing more on them. They got to be in the election here in the next month.
We've got November coming up.
And so I am not actually planning events at this point because I don't want to confuse the electorate. A lot of people, if you announce too early, think you're going to be on the ballot, and I don't want that to be thought.
So Bill, if Bill makes a decision to go forward, it's not this November, guys. Right? That's the whole point. This November, we've got folks. So as we're champion Daniel Gage. We're a big Daniel Gage fan.
Daniel and I, and I've been with Daniel a lot, and I've been working with Daniel, helping him fundraise, do things that, because I think he'll be a phenomenal senator, and he's intelligent. He's made so many sacrifices for our country, and he gets it. He's a servant. He's not a politician, and that means so much to me.
Absolutely, and he has sacrificed. Definitely, he's a servant. He's a servant leader.
Lost a leg in Iraq. Almost lost his life. He just he gets it. He understands that. I mean, he's from South Dakota, but he grew up on a farm, small farm like Southwest Virginia, and he just understands people.
He just gets it.
He has a heart.
Yeah.
And so, I always tell people, look at the heart. Don't look at the individual. If they look like a politician and they sound like a politician, you're probably going to get a politician. But if you look at their heart and you understand their desire to serve you, then you're going to get somebody that's going to work for you.
Well, and I don't want to detract too much from November, but just if you make the decision.
If I make the decision.
If you make the decision. So let's play hypothetical. If you make the decision, you talk about some of these other candidates that have talked about running, Riggleman, Cox, Chase. What would be something that you would say sets you apart if you decide to run?
Well, I think the fact that I'm a worker, I've not been involved in political party politics per se, like most people. If you look at my history in politics, I just felt led to go. And I'd been injured in a car accident as a trooper, didn't know what I was going to do, but I still wanted to protect people. And, God just opened this door for me to walk through. And so I walked through it. I won. I beat an incumbent to get there. No one knew. I had no political experience, but I sure knew a lot about the law of Virginia and how our founders intended for it to be. And so what sets me apart is I'm not looking for another title. Yes, it'd be an honor to be the governor, but I'm not looking for a title to be governor of Virginia. I am so concerned about where we're headed in Virginia. And I just want to be able to be in a position unlike I've never been before, because even though I had a lot of power when I was in the Senate, I chaired the Transportation Committee. I was on finance. I had the votes in finance on financial situations. When Terry McCullough tried to take our concealed reciprocity away, I was the guy that took his security unit away and held them until he agreed that everybody should have protection.
Read up on that, guys. That's pretty cool. That's a pretty cool one. I've heard of that one as well. Yes.
So I took the budget amendment from being on finance, and I said, no, if he doesn't want you to protect yourself with giving you reciprocity to carry your firearm in other states, then you shouldn't be taking the state's dollars to surround yourself with protected units.
Absolutely.
And I brought that forward, even with the bill. Even there was several, Amanda, myself, Bryce Reeves, Jill Vogel. We all had the bill to have a 50-state reciprocity. Bryce's bill was the lowest number, so they all got rolled into it. But I was the only one that took his money away, and he didn't like that. He knew that I was serious about taking it. And so when it came time to sign the bill, even though the Attorney General didn't want it done, he signed the bill. So we're sometimes, having served in those positions, you understand how the political realm works, and you have to be firm and you have to be willing to stand up. And I was never afraid to do that. I don't back down easily. Well, I don't back down. That's my problem. But I believe in my convictions. I believe in the people of this state. I've protected the people of the state, and what sets me apart from all the rest of them, I know how to keep you safe. I've been in the riots. I served in the Virginia Beach riots. I served when the coal fields were in disarray over contract disputes and were on strike. I served in those. I've served undercover in the city of Richmond when they had the highest murder rate in the nation. I know how to keep you safe. And under a Carrico governor, if there's riots going on, the first one that raises their hand and throws a rock or does anything outside of what is protected under the Constitution of peacefully protesting,
Which they have the right to do.
peaceful means tranquil.
That's right.
I'm all for.
Absolutely. Even if we disagree with them.
I don't care.
That's right.
You have a right. I've stood in protests, and the people were peaceful. I didn't agree with what they were protesting over, but I made sure nobody bothered them.
That's right.
They had the right to do that. But when you raise your hand, when you throw a rock, when you pull out a bat, that then becomes an unlawful assembly. And you ask for them to disperse. And then you tell them to disperse.
Mm-hmm.
And at the third call, if they're not gone, you put them in jail.
Well, and I mean, for me personally, I feel like if they pull out that's a threat. They're threatening you.
Sure.
It's not only an unlawful assembly, it's just a threat. And a lot of people, they hear that, they say, well, the police said that they were going to disperse. They feel like, well, we're peacefully protesting. When you're marching around with rocks,
Riot equipment that
you're looking for a fight. It's like the old saying: if you go looking for trouble,
you're going to get a fight.
You're going to
fight. And I've said it many times. The hardest thing for me being governor is staying out of the front Humvee to go get them, because I've been there and I know what it's like, and I know how it took us 3 days to take the city of Virginia Beach back in the riots. And if you let it go, it will grow like a cancer.
We've seen that grow like cancer, sadly.
Portland, Oregon is a prime example.
Yeah. And it's sad to see that for folks that live there.
It is. I mean, no one should have to endure that.
Yeah, they've been abandoned by their representatives, is what I would say.
The number one job of the chief executive officer is to protect the people and their properties. And they are not doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And he is the chief executive officer. He executes the law. And he's not doing it.
They're not doing their job.
They're not doing it. And I'm just not I'm a no nonsense person. I have no gray area. It's right or it's wrong. And if it's wrong, I'm coming after you.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this question. So we're talking about some things that are wrong. Again, if you become governor, with some of the things that have happened here in Virginia, you mentioned about the one handgun per month. We've got the universal background checks. These other things that are certainly viewed, and I do agree that I think they are an infringement on our Second Amendment protected rights. Would you, as governor, pursue to have those infringements removed?
I would. It would require some changes in the General Assembly to do so. But I also think, and you mentioned the red flag law. Mm-hmm. I also think that the red flag law is unconstitutional.
I agree. It violates multiple amendments.
It does. Search and seizure,
due process.
It violates all those things. So as the governor currently has refused to enforce marijuana laws. Mm-hmm. He's refused to enforce several laws that were on the books for abortion clinics. And he always cited that he felt it was unconstitutional, but the General Assembly had not reversed it. The same will hold true with the red flag law if I become governor. It will not get enforced. I don't care what you're going to have to take me to court and prove that that's constitutional.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think it's pretty obvious it's not.
It's not. It's
amazing that some people twist it to say that it is, but it's not.
People have asked me countless times, well, why doesn't it get challenged and the Supreme Court make a ruling? In order for it to get challenged, it's millions of dollars for someone or some organization to challenge that. unfortunately, until someone's killed over that, no one will take an interest. And why should we be losing someone's life over something that you and I, who are not attorneys, can see? Evidently, I mean, the evidence is so clear that that's not constitutional.
And it goes back to, like you said earlier, I mean, right being called wrong and wrong being called right.
It is.
It's plain sight. So.
Now, the universal background checks, I don't agree with them, but those are things that are policy driven that, I just feel like they're fraught with, causing people to get arrested over things that they shouldn't be. I mean, look, if you're my son and I want to give you a gun, I shouldn't have to do a background check. Now, they'll say, well, you don't have to do that under this law. But if you're my best friend and I want to give you a gun that we grew up together, we hunted together, and you've always liked this 35 caliber Marlin I've got, then why, if I want to give that to you, should I not be able to do that?
Mm-hmm.
I know you. I've grown up with you. I don't need to do a background check on you.
Well, it's funny because I hear people all the time say that they'll make the analogy to vehicles. They say when you get a vehicle, you got to register it. And I say to them, that's if you're going to drive it on the road.
You don't have to do it if you're not putting it on highway.
That's exactly right. And that goes back to the whole conversation about public utility. Now, if you're going to operate, now not carry because that's your personal body, but if you were going to go out and operate a fire range or something like that, that might be a little bit different. It's still probably private property, but again, the difference between vehicles is that's being operated on a public utility, and that's why registration. If I buy a vehicle and I never plan to use it anywhere except my farm, there is no law that I'm aware of that says I have to register that vehicle. That's just here. I'm using it on my farm. It's like buying a hammer and sticking it in my drawer. It's just a tool on the farm.
There's old Jeeps all over this country that has never been registered that are being used on farms and golf courses and everywhere else.
Absolutely.
I think if most people now, even today, if they were to sell you a firearm before this background check was done, they would always, just for their protection, do a letter and say, I'm signing over ownership to you. And that's just for yours and their protection.
Yeah. Just
so nobody can say you stole that gun.
I've bought some before. I mean, they unfortunately all sank to the bottom of the ocean in a tragic event, but I don't have any more. But yeah, I know exactly what you mean. So,
yeah.
Top 3 issues if you became governor. What would be the top 3 things you'd focus on?
Top 3 would be securing constitutional right. Well, the whole Secure Virginia initiative is about that. Is number one, the security of the people, securing the economy. I mean, we cannot survive in this state by raising the minimum wage to $15 when all the states around us is $7.25. Businesses are going to leave left and right.
Absolutely.
And then we're going to have to refocus on this Green New Deal that they did in Virginia, because you're going to drive utility rates to the point where people's businesses suffer, people's livelihoods suffer because of the cost to do it. And, we're going to have to go back and take a real look at this ability for localities to unionize. Because if localities unionize, get bargaining powers, property taxes are going to escalate, business taxes are going to escalate. So securing the economy by looking at this, and over the 18 years, we were number 1 to do business in the nation for 4 of those years I was there. And it wasn't because of Bill Carrico, it was because we all worked on trying to get that done. And so when I heard all these things going about, I'm like, well, this is going to really plummet us. And some of the comments from the Democrats were, well, there's nothing wrong with being number 10 or number 12. Well, there's a real problem with that. And that's, your people are not happy unless they have an opportunity to work and provide for their families.
Absolutely.
And so we've got to focus, secure our economy, secure our educational opportunities. And when I say educational opportunities, we've seen through COVID that our kids and their parents really do a good job on educating their children and giving them opportunities to choose how they educate their children, be it through public education, homeschooling them, private charter Christian schools. It's something that we need to focus on and give that right back to the families and give them some credit for doing that. I mean, their tax dollars are paying for the public schools, and there's curriculums that these families use in homeschools that are very expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And they should have tax credits that gives them a break because they're already paying for a public school.
Mm-hmm.
And so I believe in tax credits for families that do private, that do homeschool, that do Christian schools, whatever. And then college. If my kids are moving on to college, which my kids have, and I've mortgaged my house twice, because I think we enslave our kids to college debt.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we have to take a real look on how we restructure this tuition. And when I say restructure, if you're going to be a public servant, if you're going to be a nurse, if you're going to be a teacher, if you're going to be a police officer, these public service sector jobs, there's not as much return on the investment that you're getting at a college level to pay back a loan. And you're providing service for the people of the state. So there should be a break in the tuition, because most of those individuals are not being taught by professors. They're being taught by adjuncts. Absolutely. And so that person shouldn't be paying the same tuition level as the doctor, the lawyer, the engineer, because their return on their investment is going to be greater. And then after retention, because it costs so much money, you realize it cost $100,000 just to train and equip one trooper to put on the highway. So we do that, and he's there for 4 years, and the federal government takes him because of his training. So we lose so much money. So if you want to save money in this state through this process, if those individuals are willing to stay in Virginia, and we've done this before, then you give them a 15%, 20% break on their tuition after they've stayed in Virginia for a period of 10 years. So securing our economy, it's securing our educational opportunities, and most importantly, securing our constitutional rights. I mean, don't mess with them.
It's pretty straightforward. Should be straightforward.
I've always said, I've kind of guided myself by the Bible and the Constitution. If I find a common ground between what I've been taught morally and what I know constitutionally, mm-hmm. I'm not going to make huge mistakes, because most people want to live peacefully and want to live. That's why law and order is so important. They believe in law, but they don't believe in order.
Right. But
you've got to have both to live happily in a country like this. And if we don't have it, those are the three, you might as well say four things, because I believe so impassionately that until we protect people and their properties, the fear of them being able to go to work, send their kid to school, live in their home, it's going to be so bad that they don't live life. They just shelter.
Well, you just said, and earlier we said life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. It all fundamentally goes back to those things. And I agree with you. I think most people, for the most part, I think people just want to be left alone, have their liberty, and pursue their happiness and live their life, right?
So that's my platform. I mean, look, I hear governors, Ed Gillespie had a 21-point plan. I'm like, wow, Ed, how are you going to do that in 4 years?
Right.
I'm just
you're going to have some focus.
I'm focusing on 4 things total. And I can make your life happy. I can make you safe. I can reach those goals of setting those standards. And I've been there for 18 years. I don't have to tell you I'm going to do this because I've already done this.
You've been there, done it.
I've been there and done it.
Yeah.
And so, I've introduced bills for tax incentives for small businesses to be able to survive. I've worked on bills that would prohibit counties from superseding state law, like they're doing right now with gun issues.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Fairfax County is already banning weapons.
That's right.
That's so confusing. You can't do that.
Well, and you think about even when
That's
you're
unconstitutional.
traveling from city to city, you're going to have to understand the law. It's hard enough understanding reciprocity state
What
to
are you gonna do?
state.
Throw the gun out the window when you get to Fairfax?
That's right.
I mean, that's what they're basically saying.
That's right.
So those are bills. Bills that I did in the House for things to just prevent them from superseding state laws. I had 100% rating from the VCDL. I was A+ rated by the NRA, and that's because they knew I understood it. And the irony of all this is they just could not grasp. The Democrats focus on objects, on statues, on guns, and they could not understand this when in 2007 my family was murdered. My cousin, her husband, her 4-year-old, and she was 8 months pregnant.
I didn't know this.
The guy walks in and he kills them all. And they grew up right. Her father and I are only 4 years apart. So they were just like kids to me.
Right.
And so when my mother called me and told me that Nessie had been killed, and I went and talked to the sheriff and figured out how it all happened. It was just like execution. The guy walks in, shoots Joey in the head, kills him right on as he comes through the door. And Nessie is giving Jalen a bath, and she hears the gunshot. She comes out, she sees him with the gun, and she fights him after he shoots her 5 times. Fights him all the way to the bathroom to try to prevent him from shooting her. And he turns the gun and shoots Jalen and kills her. They can't understand why I fight for gun rights. Because Nessie, if she'd have had a gun,
Yes.
she could have stopped her child from getting killed. And how come you can't understand that? Those are life, and what makes me a good gunman is I have real life stories that I live through.
And
it's not something I learned from a book or from.
And to the keyboard warriors out there, it's easy to sit back when you've not experienced. I mean, what you just described right there, I can't even imagine. I mean, to think
My family grieved horribly.
I can only imagine.
You got 4 members of your family dead, and my family also had such a compassion for the guy that killed them that they never would pursue the death penalty. That was their choice. But should the death penalty be implied? Sure, there's evil people.
Yeah.
And it should. But it should be the family's choice as to whether they pursue it.
Yeah.
And ours didn't.
Yeah. Well, but it speaks to that right, and why that right to be able the Second Amendment is so incredibly important, right?
It is. I think many times my dad and I talked about it. If Nessie would have had a gun,
Mm-hmm.
There's no doubt the way she fought. I'm not going to get into the details of it, but it's all right there. I mean, you can see how it happened. She would have shot him, and she could have protected Jalen from him. Now, she may have been killed, but she could have protected her child.
Mm-hmm.
And the 8-month-old, who was pretty much fully developed, may not have survived it. But it was a horrible situation, and the Democrats still can't believe that I would fight for gun rights,
Right.
knowing that would happen to my family, and it had nothing to do with the gun.
Yeah,
had to do with the mentality of the guy that walked.
The
in.
evil that walked in their door. It's the evil. The firearm was not the evil. That's just a tool that it was used. So I agree. I did not know that story. That's certainly a testimony to. I mean, that's not the purpose of the Second Amendment is around tyranny, but self-protection is it's described in the Bible even.
Absolutely.
You know, we have the right to protect
Live
ourselves.
by the sword, you die by it.
That's right. That's right.
And so-
You mentioned earlier around United. I know we're way past time, by the way, and so you know.
Yeah, I was wondering how. I'm
It's
fine.
just
I'm fine.
It's
I'll
an easy
answer.
conversation. So we've got a few more here. Just want, and then we'll wrap this up. We'll give about maybe 5 more minutes, guys. So here I said focus a minute ago, and these my viewers they know.
Yeah, look,
They know I just talk a
having a
lot.
conversation.
Okay, so because there is another thing with the rioting and everything going on. You know, if we think about in the Commonwealth, there seems to be this separation between Northern Virginia and Southwest Virginia. In politics in general across the whole United States, we're seeing this left versus right. As governor, how do you think? What options do we have to bring some unity back? Because you know, what would you do? What do you
So
think?
as chairman of transportation, I spent a lot of time in Northern Virginia because of the transportation problems. I get it. I understand. I mean, when you're a soccer mom and it takes you 2 hours to drive 5 miles to see your kid and you miss the soccer game, when you've had a system up there of transit issues because you have a multi-state issue going on with the Silver Line and all the things with the metro up there, you've got real problems. You're spending a lot of money on things that you shouldn't be spending money on. And so I dove in and I've worked with these people on their transportation issues. And in Richmond, you know, working with people at the airports to make sure runways are improved so that goods can come in and go out. In Virginia Beach, working on deepening the ports so goods can come in and go out. Honestly, Southwest Virginia has the same problems as ports in the inner cities. We're neglected. We're not, you know, the people are forgotten because it's all focused on supplying the money into the more affluent areas because they are the ones that produce a large number of dollars for the state. So, you know, I can relate to what Norfolk and Portsmouth and Southside, because Southwest has some of the same problems. And I think striking that balance is the key to being a governor, is one that can walk in. I've lived up there. I lived up there for 10 years as a trooper. I lived in the city of Richmond. And I think being able to identify and understand what their problems are and helping them understand what ours are is the key to it. And I think that I have the opportunity to be able to sit down. I'm one of those guys that I want to hear, whether I agree with you or not. You may come to me and say, I think we ought to do X, Y, and Z. And I'm going to say, Jeff, I can't go there. That's just not where we can go with this. You're going to have to convince me and show me why you've got to do that. And then we'll have this conversation and we'll figure out a way to get to common ground, or we'll part ways. I still like you, Jeff. In the future, I want you to come back and talk to me. But in that same sense, there's got to be ways to negotiate and to figure it out. Mm-hmm. Because every region is different. And every region is different in need. But the one thing that's common throughout the state is the safety of those people. And they want to be safe. And I feel I appeal to them because, as my wife says, there's no doubt that when you walk in the room that they're going to say, if you say I'm going to keep you safe, they're going to keep you safe.
Absolutely.
So,
well, you said communication. I like to hear that. I mean, like you said, that's something that, again, sadly in society, it's important to talk. You can disagree, but you can still be respectful.
Sure.
That's sadly seems to be a dying trait. But I appreciate the fact that you say that communication is important. So, and understanding. You mentioned understanding between the parties, right? Between the parties, Northern Virginia, Southern Virginia, it's the same issues. We may not see them that way. So, being the translator to make us understand it's those common things that we can all focus on.
You're never going to convince me that your progressive movement of you're entitled to this and that is ever going to be something I'm going to agree with. But if you tell me that we have got to find a way to help an area to get to somewhere, I'm willing to sit and listen.
Mm-hmm.
But government, like you said, Jefferson said, a government that can give you everything can take it all away. I'm not giving you everything.
And that's protecting the people.
That's protecting the people. That's it.
Yes. Okay. And last question. November's coming up. Let's close out with thinking about November. What are your predictions nationally and in the state? You want to throw anything out there? What do you think's going to happen?
Trump wins. I believe he wins.
Landslide or?
I look, if I'm predicting, I think he wins by more than he beat Hillary by.
If people go out and vote,
if they vote, if the trend and the wind that's underneath the feet of the people to get out and do something this time holds true, he wins. He wins by more than he beat Hillary by. I predict that there'll be a civil unrest over the fact that he won. Mm-hmm. And I believe that they're going to try to come out and say, well, there's 80 million ballots that's not been counted. But I'm hoping and I'm praying that he wins, that the 80 million don't really matter. And I think we win Virginia. I really do. I think we are on the cusp of people actually taking charge of their life again and saying to areas in Northern Virginia, you're not going to dictate what we do in Central Virginia. You're not going to dictate as to what we do in Southwest or South Side or the Valley or the beach. You're not going to dictate anymore. We're coming out and we're voting. And that's what I'm looking for. Because if that happens, then, I'm going to give it a shot. I don't know that I'll win. Mm-hmm. And look, if I get in and I lose, I'm not coming out independent. I'm getting behind the Republican and let's go forward.
We need to unite around that one person.
The worst Republican's better than the best Democrat that's wanting to take away your rights.
Yep. Well, and we saw that. Well, that's what got Northam in there right now. Was a split of the vote. We've got to get behind one candidate when that time comes.
Now, I will say the involvement of how much I do this, get behind that person, I'm going to support them, but the work I do depends on which one wins.
That makes sense.
Because, there's some things that have been said that I just don't agree with. And
that's standing by your morals and principles.
That's it. So, it depends on the winner there, how much involvement I get in and how much support. I'm not going to vote or encourage people to vote for the Democrat against any of them. Mm-hmm. But, it's selfish to run independent if you lose.
I think it's important to say that the issues facing us, and I'm saying this, you can say if you agree with this or not afterwards, but the issues facing us are bigger than any individual. And we have to be willing to put our self-pride, no matter how maybe you might feel the pride to go, like you said, and run independent. I think it's important that we've got to look at that and say, okay, for the benefit of the people, we've got to get behind one candidate because that's going to be the best way to preserve the rights for the people. Otherwise, we lose the Democrats and we get the same thing that's happening all over Portland and Chicago and everything else that the Democrats are bringing.
Remember, the office is bigger than you.
Absolutely.
The president's, it used to really get under my skin when I'd see pictures of Obama with his feet propped up on the Resolute desk. That's bigger than you, Barack Obama. That office is the people's, not yours.
That's right.
Respect it.
And it's the same as the governor in the state.
Same as the governor. Respect it. Respect the office you hold. Respect the fact that it's the people who put you there. You didn't get there on your own.
That's right.
You didn't do anything special to get there. But the people were convinced that what you said that you would do and that you would respect gave you the opportunity. And to do that to people is disrespecting them. It's disrespecting both sides. And look, once the election's over, you're the governor of Virginia. Democrat, Republican, Independent, all of them. You're their governor. Mm-hmm. And like it or not, you're going to have to govern to what is going to help people. It's not about you anymore. It's about Virginia. And I always, Kurt Cox and I are great friends. We're one of the best friends, that I know. Good guy, humble. I always tell him, you're humble and quiet. I'm humble and stern, is the difference between you and I. And so, Kirk and I talk quite a bit about this challenge. And so, when I heard that he was going to run, I just, I'm thinking, how do I run against a guy that I'm just close friends with? But it's just bigger than him. It's bigger than me. And there's going to be others that get in that I'm friends with. And I don't want to talk about the other people. I want you to hear what I've got to say and make that choice. And if you don't like me, that's fine. I did what I was called to do, and I stepped up, and no hard feelings.
Yeah.
I've been, I got some pretty thick skin in the jobs I've been in. So
you'd say you have to, right? Absolutely.
Yeah. God never told us we wouldn't have trials. He just said that you face them.
And you deal the best that you can, and you make it work, right?
That's it.
So, well, Senator Bill Carrico, I know we are way over our time, and there is so our channel is of course a two-way channel, but we also I often close this in prayer. There's a verse of scripture, and again to our viewers, I usually have my Bible, and again I think I've left it in my wife's car today, but I have a particular verse of scripture that I do want to share. It's 1 Timothy 2, verses 1 and 2. It's the same verse we shared in the last episode. But again, given your position is why I want to share this. It says, I urge then, first of all, that petitions, prayers, intercessions, and thanksgiving be made for all people, for kings and all those in authority, that we may live peaceful and quiet lives in all godliness and holiness. And so, I'll close this in prayer in a moment, but I like that verse of scripture because it talks about that we're all trying to live peaceful, quiet lives in godliness and holiness. And we should pray for our leaders and our representatives. I think we could go into other verses of scripture that talk about being accountable. And so I guess I would just say to you, thank you for your previous service. As you move forward and you continue seeing where God leads you, I'll pray for you. I'd ask our viewers to pray for all of our representatives and to pray for Senator Carrico as he reflects upon that and where it may go. If you want to be part of the landslide victory and I'll have the same predictions as you, be a part of it. Don't let complacency keep you home, right? You've got to get out and vote. I've said complacency, I think, is our greatest enemy. We sit back and we think it's going to be a landslide. I don't even have to worry about go voting. That is what's going to cause us to lose if you think that way. Go out, be part of this victory. Get your name on that ballot, or get your name on the vote, put it there, put it down, be part of the landslide. So anything you want to say in closing before I close in prayer?
Just, I believe that this is in the people's hands. We can move towards a more government-controlled, socialistic governing power, or we can stand up, and it has to be now to stand up. And once we get through 2020, we can't become complacent at all, because everything that people say that Trump needs to be doing in Virginia is violating the 10th Amendment right, because Trump cannot come into Virginia and take care of anything unless he's invited in by the governor, because under the states' rights, under the 10th Amendment, if you believe in the Constitution, then he has no right to be coming in unless he's invited in by the governor.
Absolutely.
And we have got to take our stand, because as Virginia goes, so does the nation.
And so all those folks that aren't in the Commonwealth, reach out to folks you know in the Commonwealth. Make sure they know about the channel. Make sure they understand the importance, because it will impact you. If you're in Arkansas, Texas, Nevada, Alaska, wherever you may be watching from, you're exactly right. The country goes with Virginia, guys. And so it's very, very impactful. Be part of this. Get involved. Again, Delynn, myself, any of the other admins and Scott County VA gun owners, we can help you get registered. We can walk you through that process. And when the time comes to get out and vote, which, by the way, early voting, you can do it now. You can do early voting. So go ahead and vote. If you're not sure about the process, reach out to us. But just whatever you do, be sure to vote. So I'm going to close out a word of prayer if you don't mind.
Please.
Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, just want to thank you, God, for this day, Lord, and thank you for this opportunity to be here, Father. Lord, I just want to remind all of us that, Lord, that even in the state of what we deal with in our personal lives and what's happening in America and across the Commonwealth, Lord, things aren't the way we would want them. But, Lord, I want to remind everyone to always give thanks, Lord, for what we do have. I still believe we live in the greatest country in the world. I know some folks disagree with that. That's okay. But my personal belief is that we still live in the greatest country in the world. And God, I just want to thank you, Lord, for what we do have, God, and I just ask for the strength that we can remain vigilant to continue to try to preserve our rights that you gave us, our God-given rights. Lord, preserve and fight for freedoms and liberties for all. Lord, even if we disagree on some things, Lord, let us try to come together in unity and focus on those common things, those common interests that bind us all together. Set our differences aside. Let our differences become our strengths as we focus on those common things, Lord, that can move us forward and make real progress. Lord, let us just, again, as we reflect and are thankful, Lord, let us focus and give us the strength to be able to make that possible. Father, I'd ask that you'd watch over all those sick and afflicted, all those lost, that they may come to know you as their Lord and Savior. Father, for whatever happens on this earth, we know that this earth is just temporary. It's just a small time compared to eternity. So, Father, if there's any lost souls out there, I'd ask that they would come to know you as their Lord and Savior so that one day they can enjoy eternity with me and when I'll be there with you. So, God, I just again ask for continued blessings upon our country. Father, all of our representatives, Senator Carrico, Lord, please watch over him, guide him. And Lord, let everything that we do not only honor and glorify you, but also let us accept the fact that, Lord, we need to have your will as our will. Lord, let us look past what our own personal desires are and let you be the guide and the leader that we follow. All these things in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right, Senator Carrico, I appreciate it very much. Again, thank you very much. I know I've kept you way over. Guys, go back and, if you can't watch it all at once, there's a lot of content that we covered. So go back, jump around. This has been a really, really good conversation. Until next time, stay safe, fight the good fight, keep your firearms close, but keep God closer. See you guys next time.
Good job.